client wasn't just another account. It was my way out. I learned that early at Fianetic Corporation. There were two kinds of people here. Those who were born inside the glass tower, and those of us who spent our lives pressing our palms against it, hoping someone would finally let us in. I was the second kind. I grew up in a house where the heat went off every winter like clockwork, where my mom used to water down soup so it would last 3 days instead of 1, where career goals weren't dreams, they were escape plans. So when Leo Tucker told me 3 years ago, if you want to make senior partner before 35, you need one legacy deal, I listened like my life depended on it. Because it did. The Wilsborn account was legendary inside Fianetic. A collapsing industrial empire. Billions bleeding out through invisible cracks. Everyone said it was cursed, too complicated, too political, too dangerous to touch. But I touched it anyway. For 6 months, I lived inside that deal. I woke up to spreadsheets. Fell asleep to market forecasts playing in my head like nightmares. Missed birthdays. Missed holidays. Missed entire weekends without noticing. I became the kind of employee Leo loved, quiet, obedient, endlessly available. The kind you could work to the bone without consequence. By the 4th month, I stopped correcting him when he mispronounced. I stopped correcting him when he mispronounced my name. By the 5th, I stopped reminding him I hadn't taken a vacation in 2 years. By the 6th, my hands shook whenever I held my coffee, and I told myself it was just stress. Just one more push. Just one more night. Because when the Wilsborns were saved, I wouldn't be Debbie from the suburbs anymore. I'd be senior partner Debbie. And no one could take that from me. Or so I thought. What it cost me at home. Mark noticed before I did. Not the spreadsheets. Not the deal. Me. He noticed the way I'd sit at the kitchen table staring into nothing long after my laptop was closed. The way I flinched when my phone buzzed. The way I slept like someone bracing for impact. You missed the rehearsal call, he said gently one night. I looked up, confused. What rehearsal? He didn't get mad. That was the worst part. He just smiled a little and said, It's okay. We'll run it again. I had missed my own wedding rehearsal because Leo needed one last scenario model. I cried in the shower that night so Mark wouldn't hear me. Not because of the wedding. Because I was afraid that if I stopped, even for a second, everything I'd built would vanish. The lies in the glass office. The morning I brought the Wilsborn file to Leo's office, the lobby looked different. Not because it had changed, but because I had. The glass still stretched upward toward the clouds like a promise no one intended to keep. The marble floors, polished to a mirror finish, still echoed under the hurried, expensive shoes of people who didn't have time to look down. The air still smelled of that high-end espresso and the faint, chemical scent of industrial disinfectant. But for the first time in 6 months, my shoulders weren't clenched around my ears. I was tired. A deep, bone-weary exhaustion that made my limbs feel like lead. But it was a good tired. I clutched the Wilsborn file to my chest, a bright smile on my face. Today was the best day ever. I had landed the biggest client yet. I was going higher. I was certain Leo was calling me in to finally announce that I was the new senior partner. Debbie, please join us. Leo welcomed me into his office. My face fell when I saw he wasn't alone. In the room was Damon Wells, my nemesis, a corporate vulture who did nothing but still managed to climb ahead. He was leaning against the wall, one ankle crossed over the other, tossing a gold-plated lighter in the air. Clink. Catch. Clink. Catch. Morning, boys, I said, taking a seat and crossing my legs. I put on my best game face. What's going on? Damon let out an annoying laugh. We were just talking about your wedding. Thursday, right? I nodded, my heart thumping. What about it? I watched as my boss and Damon scrambled, their eyes meeting for a split second in a way that made my skin crawl. Just what gift to get you? Damon looked at Leo, his voice a low, mocking drawl. Right, Leo added, his face as blank as a tombstone. What gift to get you? There's a registry on Amazon, I said, trying to stay pleasant. You could buy us anything from there. I placed the Wilsborn file on the mahogany desk, expecting Leo to open it, to praise me, to give me the seat. Instead, he just tapped the cover without looking at the data. Good work, Debbie. Now go home. Focus on the wedding. We've got everything under control here. As I walked out of the office and back through that immaculate lobby, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. They were lying. I could feel it in the way Damon smirched and the way Leo wouldn't meet my eyes. Something was going on, and it wasn't about an Amazon registry. The lace and the liars. The morning of my wedding didn't smell like the office. There was no scent of industrial cleaner or burnt espresso. Instead, the air was thick with the fragrance of white peonies, expensive hairspray, and the faint, sweet trail of vanilla candles. I sat in the dressing room, staring at my reflection. The mermaid gown was a masterpiece, the lace bodice clinging to me like a second skin, shimmering under the soft vanity lights. I looked like the woman I had always wanted to be, successful, respected, and whole. But beneath the silk and the lace, the memory of Leo's office from a few days ago sat like a cold stone in my stomach. "What gift to get you?" they had asked. I had tried to believe them. I had wanted to believe that for once, they were being professional colleagues instead of snakes. "You're breathtaking, Debbie," my mother whispered, pinning the veil into my hair. She saw the beauty. She didn't see the knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. The church was a blur of music and light. As the heavy oak doors opened and the organ swelled, I began the walk. My father's arm was steady, but as my eyes swept the pews, I caught them. Leo and Damon. They were sitting in the third row, tucked away like shadows. They weren't looking at the bride. They were huddled over Damon's phone, their thumbs moving rapidly. Even here, in the sanctuary of my marriage, the vulture was circling. The vows were a haze. Mark's voice was the only thing that kept me grounded. He gripped my hands, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment, the corporate world vanished. Then came the reception. It was a cavern of noise and celebration. We sat at the head table, the white tiers of the wedding cake standing tall beside us. I watched Leo and Damon move through the crowd, whispering, their eyes constantly darting back to me with a demeaning, predatory amusement. Then the music stopped. I stood up to thank my parents and loved ones, but the screech of a microphone cut through the room. "Hang on, Debbie. I think the boss gets a word first, don't you?" Leo was standing near the stage, a glass of bourbon in one hand. He gestured for Damon to join him. The vulture stood there, hands in his pockets, a sharp, jagged smirk plastered across his face. "First of all," Leo's voice boomed, "I want to congratulate the happy couple. Debbie, you're an amazing woman. And a few days ago, you asked what gift we were going to get you." Leo paused, a cruel glint in his eye. "Damon and I decided that the best gift we could give you was freedom. As of this morning, the Wilsborns have officially signed their new contracts. Because this account is the largest in our history, the board has used it to fast-track Damon Wells to senior partner. Effective immediately, he is taking over the role that was meant for you, Debbie. We've decided to take the burden of the Wilsborns out of your hands so you can focus on being a wife." The room went deathly silent. My mother gasped. I felt the air leave my lungs. 6 months. I had dominated that deal for 6 months. I had sacrificed my time, my sleep, and my sanity for that specific title. It was the culmination of my career, the proof that I was the best in the room. And now, my own strategy was being used as the fast track for the man who hadn't written a single line of the proposal. "That's very nice, Leo," I said, my voice trembling as I stood up. "But I built that relationship. I am the one who earned that fast track. I'm the one who deserves that seat." Damon stepped forward then, pulling a document from his tuxedo jacket. "Actually, Debbie," he drawled, mocking my name. "They signed that to me. Your name has been removed from all company filings. Since I'm the new senior partner, I've decided you're no longer needed on the project. You've been erased from the account entirely." He didn't hand the document to me. He tossed it. The paper fluttered through the air and landed with a sickening thud right in the middle of our wedding cake. The white frosting smeared across the Wilsborn name, covering the space where mine should have been. A wave of pure, cold devastation hit me. He wasn't just my colleague anymore. He was my superior. He had jumped over me using the very ladder I had built. As long as he was senior partner, he would be my boss. The man I'd have to ask for permission, the man who would take credit for every win I had left. My career hadn't just stalled, it had been hijacked. They wanted a partner who understands the long-term game, Damon chuckled. Not someone who's going to be distracted by domesticity. Don't even bother checking your office email on Monday. Your access has been revoked. I'm the boss now. I stood there, the mermaid gown feeling like a shroud. Everything I had fought for, the prestige, the respect, the career I had built from the ground up, it was all gone. Swallowed by the vulture. "Is that your final word, Leo?" Mark asked. He didn't yell. He stood up slowly, looking at Leo with a cold, terrifying curiosity. "You're sure you want to give him her promotion? You're sure you want to fast-track him on her work?" Here. Today. Leo laughed, a dry, rattling sound. Sit down, Mark. Go back to your history books. Your wife is a dreamer who just woke up to reality. She should be happy she still has a desk at all. Damon let out one last demeaning chuckle. See you Monday, Debbie. Or don't. The research pool is where we put the people who don't have what it takes for the top floor. They walked away, leaving the paper in the smeared frosting. I looked at Mark, my eyes stinging. They erased me, Mark. He took my title. He's my boss now. Mark leaned in, his lips brushing my ear, his voice a low, dangerous hum. They didn't erase you, Debbie. They just cleared the stage for your real entrance. Monday is coming. And on Monday, the vulture finds out what happens when he tries to steal from a lion. The boardroom reckoning. Monday morning didn't arrive with a bang. It arrived with a cold, metallic silence. I didn't wear the black suit of a mourner. I wore a tailored midnight blue power suit that I had bought 3 years ago for the day I thought I'd become a partner. It was sharp, expensive, and felt like armor. I walked through the lobby of Fianetic Corp, and for the first time in 5 years, the security guards didn't look at me. My key card, the one I had swiped thousands of times, didn't beep. It flashed a dead, mocking red. I was officially a ghost in the machine I had built. I waited for a group of interns to bustle through the turnstiles and slipped in behind them. I wasn't going to my cubicle. I wasn't going to the basement pool. I was going to the 50th floor, the executive boardroom. When the elevator opened, the air changed. It was thinner here. More expensive. Damon was already there, standing outside the double mahogany doors. He was wearing a suit that was trying too hard, and he was holding a gold-plated nameplate. He had already taped over the door, Damon Wells, senior partner. He looked up, and the vulture's eyes narrowed. Debbie, what are you doing here? I thought I made it clear at the wedding. Your access was revoked. You're erased, remember? You don't exist in this building anymore. I didn't stop walking. I stood right in front of him, so close he had to lean back. I'm here for the shareholders' meeting, Damon. The one regarding the Willsborn merger. Damon let out a jagged, demeaning laugh that echoed down the hallway. The shareholders' meeting? You don't even own a stapler in this company. Leo, he called out as the office door opened. Leo Tucker stepped out, looking sleek and satisfied. He looked at me with the same blank indifference he'd shown at the wedding. Debbie, you're trespassing. We're waiting for the majority shareholder, the heir to the Fianetic estate. He doesn't have time for a disgruntled ex-employee who can't take a hint. I'm staying, I said, my voice as steady as a heartbeat. Fine, Leo sighed, checking his Patek Philippe. Stay. Stand in the corner and watch what real power looks like. Watch the man who actually owns your life walk through those doors. Maybe it'll finally sink in that you were never one of us. The boardroom doors opened. The 12 board members, men who had ignored my emails and talked over me in meetings for years, were already seated. They looked tense. They were waiting for the ghost who owned 60% of their world. Damon took the seat at the right hand of the chairman's empty chair, my seat. He leaned back, crossing his legs, looking at me with a smirk that promised he would enjoy every second of my final humiliation. He's late, Damon whispered loudly. Rich people usually are. Unlike you, Debbie. Always early. Always trying so hard. Then the heavy double doors at the far end of the room swung open. The room went silent. The board members stood up in unison, a wave of dark suits and nervous energy. A man walked in. He didn't look like the schoolteacher who failed at ambitious recipes. He didn't look like the man who wore corduroy and graded papers. He was wearing a charcoal gray, bespoke 3-piece suit that radiated absolute, crushing authority. His stride was long, confident, and predatory. It was Mark. I watched Leo's face turn from smug satisfaction to a sickly, pale gray. I watched Damon's smirk literally slide off his face, his jaw hanging open like a broken hinge. Mark didn't look at the board. He didn't look at Leo. He walked straight to the head of the table. 2 men in black suits followed him, placing 2 leather briefcases on the table with a synchronized thud. Mark, Leo stammered, his voice cracking. What is this? Security. This man is an intruder. He's the chairman, the oldest board member snapped, his voice trembling. Leo, shut up and sit down. Mark pulled out the chairman's chair. He didn't sit. He looked at the room, his eyes like ice, until the silence was so heavy it felt like it would crack the table. Mark Fianetic, my husband said. His voice wasn't the soft whisper I heard at night. It was a roar wrapped in silk. The ghost you've been trying to find for 5 years. I spent the last year watching you from the outside. I wanted to see who was actually building my grandfather's legacy and who was just picking at the carcass. He looked at Leo, then at the vulture. Damon looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. I saw how you treated the talent, Mark continued. I saw how you stole. I saw how you erased the very person who kept this company from drowning. Mark turned to me. He didn't smile. This wasn't the time for smiles. He pulled out the chair next to him. The one Leo had claimed was miles above my reach. Managing Director Debbie Fianetic, Mark said, the name hitting the room like a gavel. Take your seat. I walked forward. I didn't look at the board. I didn't look at the guards. I sat in the chair. I looked at Damon, who was shaking so hard the gold nameplate fell off the door and clattered onto the floor. Now, Mark said, leaning forward. Debbie has a report to give. And I suggest you listen. It's the last thing you'll ever hear in this building. I opened my folder. I looked at the vulture. Damon, I said, my voice calm and hollowed out of all mercy. Let's talk about those Willsborn signatures you were so proud of. The vulture's last meal. The room was still. The only sound was the frantic thumping of Damon's foot against the boardroom carpet. Leo sat frozen, his face a sickly pale, his eyes darting between Mark and me. The board members, once dismissive, now hung on my every word, their fear a palpable thing in the air. I looked at Damon. My voice, when it came, was stripped of all emotion. It was flat, calm, and utterly final. Damon, I began, my eyes locking onto his. He flinched. Let's talk about those Willsborn signatures you were so proud of. The ones you boasted about at my wedding, the ones you slid into my cake, the ones that supposedly erased my 5 years of work. I picked up the first leather briefcase Mark's men had placed on the table. I unlatched it and pulled out a stack of documents. These weren't the Willsborn contracts. These were bank statements. Offshore accounts. Shell corporations. You see, Damon, while you were busy gloating, I was busy working, I continued. And thanks to my husband's other resources. I glanced briefly at Mark, whose face remained a stone mask. I discovered that your senior partner promotion wasn't just theft. It was a cover-up. Damon started to sweat. Beads of perspiration rolled down his temples. What are you talking about? That's defamation. Leo, tell her. I turned my gaze to Leo, whose eyes were wide with dawning horror. I finally understand now, Leo, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I used to wonder why you kept promoting him. I watched Damon sleep at his desk and fail at the simplest tasks, yet you kept pushing him up the ladder. You didn't pick him because he was good. You picked him because he was stupid. You needed a senior partner who was too lazy to ever read a ledger. You needed a vulture who was so busy preening that he wouldn't notice you were using him as a shield to extort the company. I tapped the documents. Damon was your front. You let him bleed the company dry with kickbacks from his uncle, all while you skimmed millions off the top, knowing that if anyone ever investigated, the trail would end with the incompetent man in the senior partner's chair. You didn't want a partner, Leo. You wanted a puppet. I leaned forward, placing my hands flat on the polished mahogany. You tried to erase me because I was the only one smart enough to see the cracks. You tried to make me nothing. But when you tried to silence me, you unknowingly handed me the very weapon I needed to destroy you both. Mark gestured to the two men who had followed him in. They stepped forward, placing two official-looking documents in front of Leo and Damon. These are your termination papers, Mark's voice cut through the silence. Effective immediately. For corporate malpractice, gross negligence, and outright fraud. Debbie will ensure all relevant authorities are notified. Damon jumped up, knocking his chair over. No, you can't. My uncle, he's on the board. Mark raised a single eyebrow. Your uncle is being escorted out of the building as we speak. He chose his side. He chose poorly. I stood up. I walked over to Damon, who was trembling, tears starting to form in his eyes. He looked at the gold-plated nameplate still lying on the floor. I bent down, picked it up, and walked to the large waste bin beside the table. With a soft clink, I dropped it in. You said I didn't have the killer instinct for this job? I said, looking at Damon, then at Leo. You were wrong. I just don't kill for greed. I kill for justice. I looked at Leo. His face was a mask of utter defeat. Leo Tucker, Damon Wells. You are terminated. Don't touch your desks. Everything in them is now evidence in a federal investigation. Security will escort you out. The security guards moved swiftly. They took Leo by the arm, who didn't resist. He simply stared ahead, his eyes hollow. Damon, however, collapsed into his chair, sobbing, begging them to reconsider. Please, I need this job. I'm nothing without this. As they were dragged out of the room, I walked back to my seat beside Mark. He gave me a small, proud nod. I picked up the original Willsborn file, my file, and placed it gently on the table. Now, I said, my voice finally filled with something more than just hollowness. Let's talk about the future of Fianetic, and how we're going to rebuild it, starting with honesty. The real promotion. An hour later, the boardroom was empty. The sun was setting, painting the city below in hues of amber and gold. I stood by the window, looking out at the world that no longer felt like a cage. I felt Mark's warmth before I heard him. He stepped up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder. You did it, Debbie, he whispered. We did it, I corrected, leaning back into him. I'm still tired, Mark. But for the first time, I don't feel empty. Mark turned me around to face him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I caught my breath, but when he opened it, it wasn't a ring. It was a small, vintage gold lapel pin, the original seal of the Fianetic founders. My grandfather always said this company belonged to the person with the most heart, not the biggest title, Mark said softly. I've watched you slave away for 5 years for men who didn't deserve your shadow. I don't want you to run this company because I own it. I want you to run it because you're the only one who ever truly cared about it. He pinned it to my blazer, his fingers lingering against the fabric. But more than that, Mark said, his eyes filled with a sweetness that made the last 5 years of pain vanish. I want to go home. I want to try to cook that pasta again, and probably burn it. I want to sit on the couch and talk about nothing. I don't care about being a billionaire, Debbie. I just want to be the man who makes sure you never have to fight a battle alone again. I pulled him into a kiss, a quiet, private moment that felt more like a wedding than the ceremony ever had. So, I whispered against his lips. What's the first order of business for the new managing director? Mark smiled, pulling me toward the door. We're taking that honeymoon. And this time, the only thing we're focusing on is us. As we walked out of the office, hand in hand, the senior partner, office was dark and empty behind us. I didn't need the chair anymore. I had the man, the legacy, and finally my own voice.